The Last Night at Dyatlov Pass, based on true events. In early 1959, 9 young hikers set off into the snowy wilderness of the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. They were students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, handpicked by their leader, Igor Dyatlov, for a difficult expedition to reach Mount Otorten. Each member of the group was experienced in winter trekking. They carried skis, survival gear, cameras, and journals. They laughed, posed for photos, wrote entries about their progress. Spirits were high despite the brutal cold. They planned to return in a few weeks, but none of them came back. On February 1st, they made camp on the eastern slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. The name came from the local Mansi people. It meant Mountain of the Dead. The reason they chose to pitch their tent there remains unclear. A more protected area in the forest lay less than 2 kilometers away, but instead they stayed on the exposed mountainside. What happened that night is one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. Weeks passed without word. Families grew worried. Search teams were sent out, first volunteers, then the Soviet military. On February 26th, they found the hikers' tent. It was partially buried in snow, and what they saw puzzled everyone. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Their boots, jackets, and food were still there. It was as if something had made them flee without any of the essentials needed to survive the night. Footprints led down the slope into the woods, nearly 500 meters away. The tracks were strange. Some were barefoot, others in socks, and they seemed to move in a straight line rather than scatter in panic. At the forest edge, beneath a tall cedar tree, 2 bodies were discovered lying in the snow. They wore only underwear. The branches above them were broken, as if someone had climbed the tree to look for something, or escape it. 3 more were found between the tree and the tent, spaced out in the snow, positioned as if they had been trying to return to the camp. The remaining 4 weren't discovered until May, buried deeper in the snow and farther into the woods. Their injuries confused investigators. Though no external wounds were visible on some, the internal damage was severe. Officials said their injuries resembled those from a high-impact crash. 1 had a fractured skull. 2 had damaged ribs. Their deaths were labeled as caused by a compelling natural force. The report left it at that. No signs of an avalanche were found. No signs of an enemy attack, animal involvement, or natural disaster. All weapons, documents, and gear were untouched inside the tent. Some of the hikers' clothing showed elevated levels of radiation. That detail, when it eventually leaked, only fueled speculation. There was also a photograph recovered from one of the cameras. The image was blurry. Snow, trees, and something in the background. A figure, tall, shadowed. It could have been a trick of the light, or something else entirely. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed the group had stumbled into a top-secret military test, perhaps a new weapon. Others believed the wind had caused infrasound, triggering panic and confusion. Still others whispered about something unnatural in the woods, something watching. Even the lead investigator, years later, admitted there were things they weren't allowed to include in the report. He said quietly that they were told to close the case and never speak of it again. The mountain was quiet again, but it never forgot. Today, a stone memorial stands near the place where the hikers died, bearing their names and the year. Hikers still visit the site. Some report odd feelings, being watched, disoriented, hearing whispers when the wind moves through the trees. No theory ever fully explained what happened that night. Not the avalanche, which didn't match the terrain or the tracks. Not hypothermia, which couldn't account for the strange injuries. Not military testing, which had no official documentation. The hikers were smart. They had survived harsh conditions before. They weren't reckless. They knew how to handle fear. But something pushed them beyond reason. Something made them abandon their only shelter and run blindly into the night. Whatever they saw or heard that night was enough to override logic, training, and survival instinct. Something that terrified them so deeply they didn't stop to dress, didn't stop to think. They simply ran. And in the silence of the snow-covered pass, something waited. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to those 9 hikers. Their final hours remain a mystery, buried in ice and silence. But one thing is certain. They didn't just freeze to death. They were trying to get away from something that never left a trace. The Disappearance of the Sodder Children, based on true events. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, was filled with warmth and laughter. George and Jenny Sodder lived there with 9 of their 10 children. The older sons were home from work. The younger kids were excited for Christmas morning. That night, 5 of the children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, asked to stay up and play. Jenny agreed and reminded them to lock the doors and turn off the lights. Then she took the youngest child upstairs and went to bed. Sometime after midnight, Jenny woke to a strange sound, something hitting the roof and rolling. Moments later, the smell of smoke filled the air. Flames were pouring from George's office. In a panic, the family rushed out of the burning house. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children made it outside, but 5 were missing, the ones who had stayed up. George tried to go back in. A window shattered in his hands. The ladder he always kept outside was gone. He tried to drive his trucks closer to the house to climb up, but neither would start, even though both had worked the day before. They stood in the snow and watched their home collapse into ash. 7 hours later, the fire was out. Nothing remained, but there were no bones, no remains. Officials concluded that the missing children had died in the fire, and the case was closed. But the Sodders didn't believe it. Electricity had been working during the fire. How could wiring be to blame? Experts told Jenny that even in hotter fires, bones would remain. But there was nothing. Other odd details began to surface. A wrong number phone call had come in around midnight. A ladder was found down an embankment far from the house. A phone line had been cut, not burned. A man had been seen stealing parts from the property the day before. Someone even claimed to have seen the children watching from a passing car during the fire. Tips came in for years. One woman swore she saw the children at a hotel in Charleston. Another person said they had been adopted by a couple in New York, but every lead led nowhere. Then, in 1967, Jenny received a photo in the mail. No return address. It showed a man in his 20s. On the back was a strange message and a name, Louis Sodder. Louis had been one of the missing children. The man in the photo had similar features, same eyes, same smile. The Sodders believed it was him. They hired a private investigator to trace the letter. He vanished and was never heard from again. George and Jenny never gave up. They built a billboard on Route 16 with the children's photos and offered a reward. For decades, it stood as a reminder. They wore black, searched the country, and answered every letter, but the answers never came. To this day, no remains have been found. No one has claimed responsibility. Theories range from kidnapping to retribution. George had once spoken out against Mussolini. Not long after, a man warned him, "Your house will burn, and your children will suffer." The mystery remains. Why was the ladder moved? Why did the trucks fail? Why was the phone line cut? And why was there never a trace of the children? 5 lives vanished in a single night. No fire could erase them so completely. If they died, why was nothing left? If they lived, where did they go? And why, after all these years, did no one ever come forward? Whatever happened that night in 1945 has never been fully explained, and maybe it never will be. The ghosts of Eastern State Penitentiary. In the heart of Philadelphia stands a massive stone fortress, long abandoned but never silent. Eastern State Penitentiary once represented the future of prison reform. It was a place built not just to punish, but to force inmates into deep, isolating reflection. What it became was something else entirely. It opened in 1829 with a radical idea: solitary confinement. Every prisoner was kept alone, in silence, for 23 hours a day. They wore hoods over their heads when outside their cells. No contact, no voices, no names. Just time, endless time, spent in narrow rooms with high arched ceilings and one small skylight called the Eye of God. Officials believed solitude would lead to repentance. What it often led to was madness. Men were driven to whisper to themselves until their voices cracked. Some clawed at the walls. Others went silent forever. The prison's cold stone halls echoed not with sound, but with the weight of absence. As decades passed, the prison grew overcrowded. The solitary model broke down. Violence replaced silence. Torture was no longer theoretical. Guards used devices like the iron gag, a mouthpiece that would tear a man's jaw apart if he moved. Others were chained to walls in freezing conditions. One man was soaked in water and left outside in winter until ice coated his skin. Not surprisingly, many inmates never left. By the time Eastern State closed in 1971, it had held thousands of prisoners, some infamous, some forgotten. And though the bodies were removed, something else remained. When the building was abandoned, nature crept in. Trees pushed through concrete. Paint peeled like shedding skin. Windows shattered. But those who entered the ruins said it wasn't just the decay that made them uneasy. Something watched. Something moved. Workers who came to stabilize the building in the 1970s reported strange encounters. They heard footsteps echoing in empty cell blocks, chains dragging across stone, whispering voices. They felt cold spots pass through them like breath. One maintenance worker claimed he saw a shadowy figure dart past the doorway of cell block 12. When he ran to investigate, no one was there, but the cell was freezing and the air was thick. Visitors today still report similar things. Some see figures standing at the ends of long corridors, only to vanish when approached. Others hear someone crying from behind locked doors. Lights flicker even when power is disconnected. A tour guide once fainted after claiming something had whispered directly into her ear, though she had been alone at the time. Cell Block 4 is often called the most haunted section. Many report a tall shadow figure that seems to pace the hall at night, slow and deliberate, as if still on patrol. Others speak of faces appearing in the small glass windows, eyes staring back from the dark. Skeptics say it's all imagination, that the echo of such intense suffering leaves a mark not on the building, but on the mind. Still, even they admit there's a feeling inside Eastern State that's hard to shake, like the air itself is heavy, like something waits. Paranormal investigators have flocked to the site. Recordings captured strange voices, one believed to say, "I'm still here." Others have caught screams, whispers, even names, but no clear explanation ever surfaced. Perhaps it's not just one spirit. The prison once held thousands, many of whom died within those walls, some in violence, others in despair. The energy they left behind may be tangled together, echoing through cell blocks like a warning. Today, Eastern State is a museum. Visitors walk the same halls where inmates once shuffled in chains. They hear the stories. They see the untouched cells. Some laugh, others listen, but a few leave with more than just photographs. Some leave with the feeling they were not alone. And maybe they weren't, because in the silence of Eastern State Penitentiary, there are still whispers, and the walls remember everything. Character count with spaces. Bosplots 7 for 555. Word count +1 Would you like help turning this into a YouTube voiceover script with pacing suggestions, subtitles, or a compelling thumbnail to title next? The Villisca Axe Murders. In the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, the summer of 1912 brought with it no warning, no sign that the town would soon be marked by one of the most mysterious and brutal unsolved crimes in American history. On June 10th, the Moore family home sat still under the morning sun. Inside, all 8 occupants, 2 adults and 6 children, lay lifeless. They had been bludgeoned in their sleep with an axe. The killer had used the blunt end. The victims included Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children, and 2 overnight guests, Lena and Ina Stillinger, young sisters who had joined the family after a church event the night before. What shocked investigators wasn't just the brutality, but the strange, calculated calm of the scene. Mirrors were covered with cloth. A plate of uneaten food sat on the kitchen table. All the windows were covered. In every room, the killer had placed items over the victims' faces, blankets, clothing, even a piece of a dress. A lamp was left at the foot of each bed, the chimney removed to dim the light. In the attic, investigators found cigarette butts. It seemed the killer had waited there, possibly for hours, until the household had gone to sleep. Nothing was stolen, no valuables touched. The front door had been locked behind them. Word spread quickly. The town changed overnight. Fear settled in. Neighbors locked their doors for the first time. Strangers were watched with suspicion. People whispered of a monster among them, but no one could say who it was. Several suspects were questioned in the months and years that followed. A traveling preacher named Reverend George Kelly, who had been in town the night of the murders, confessed at one point, then recanted. His behavior was erratic. He was tried twice, but never convicted. Others believed the killer had moved from town to town by rail, committing similar murders across the Midwest. A string of axe killings, eerily alike, had occurred before and after Villisca, but no arrest ever stuck. The murder weapon was found in the Moore's own backyard. It belonged to Josiah. The killer had used it and then returned it, wiped down but not hidden. Over time, the case faded from headlines, but never from memory. The town moved on, but the house did not. Residents who later lived in the Moore home spoke of strange occurrences, footsteps in empty rooms, the sound of children crying at night, cold drafts that came and went without reason. Some say doors open and close on their own. Others claim to have heard whispers or felt someone watching them when no one was there. Paranormal investigators have visited the house for decades, and many leave shaken. A group once stayed overnight. In the middle of the night, one of them, an experienced investigator, suddenly became unresponsive, staring blankly before collapsing. No medical explanation was found. Today, the Moore House stands as a museum. Visitors can walk through the rooms, see the beds, the furniture, the photographs frozen in time. Many enter out of curiosity. Some leave with something else, a weight they can't explain, or a feeling that something still lingers, just out of sight. It's been over a century, and the case remains unsolved. No one knows who entered that home. No one knows why. There was no clear motive, no confession that held, no justice delivered. 8 lives were ended in a single night. No neighbors heard screams. No dogs barked. The killer came and went like smoke. The house is quiet now, but not empty. Some believe the energy of that night never left, that the walls remember, that the silence holds a memory darker than anyone has dared to face. In Villisca, Iowa, the past is not buried, it's preserved. It waits behind locked doors and shaded windows. And even now, all these years later, people still ask the same question: who did it, and why? The Bennington Triangle Disappearances. In the dense wilderness of southwestern Vermont lies a stretch of land known for its beauty, its silence, and its secrets. Between 1945 and 1950, this area, centered around Glastonbury Mountain, became the site of a series of unexplained vanishings that would earn it a chilling name, the Bennington Triangle. It began on a cold December day in 1945. Mitty Rivers, a 74-year-old hunting guide, was leading a group near the mountain when he simply vanished. He was experienced, familiar with the terrain. His group said he was walking just ahead, but when they turned a bend, he was gone. No sounds, no signs of struggle, only a spent rifle cartridge near a stream, and then nothing. The following year, in December 1946, 18-year-old Paula Weldon went hiking alone along the long trail. She was seen by several witnesses along the way, including a couple who noted she seemed cheerful. But when she never returned, a massive search began. Hundreds scoured the area. Planes flew overhead. Dogs were brought in. No trace was ever found. Her disappearance sparked national headlines and remains one of Vermont's most baffling cases. In 1949, James Tedford, a veteran, boarded a bus heading to Bennington. He was seen on the bus by multiple passengers during the ride, but when the bus arrived at its final stop, Tedford was gone. His belongings were still on his seat. The timetable lay folded in his coat pocket. He had vanished without a sound, in full view of others, yet no one had seen him leave. The following year brought 2 more cases. In October 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepson disappeared while playing near his family's truck, which was parked by a pigsty where his mother was working. She said she was only gone for a few minutes, but when she returned, Paul was gone. Bloodhounds followed his scent to a crossroads, and then it ended, like he had been lifted from the earth. Just 16 days later, Frida Langer, an experienced hiker, slipped while crossing a shallow stream. She told her cousin she would return to camp to change clothes. She never arrived. Again, search teams flooded the forest. Days turned to weeks, then months. Finally, her body was discovered 7 months later in an area that had been searched multiple times. No cause of death could be determined. 5 people, all vanished in or near the same region. No clues, no connections, no answers. Locals began to whisper. Some believed the disappearances were the work of a serial killer. Others blamed the terrain itself, dense, remote, with sudden weather shifts and hidden ravines. But the patterns felt too strange to ignore. Native American legends spoke of Glastonbury Mountain as cursed ground. The tribes avoided it, calling it a place where the four winds met and warred. Some said the mountain had no wildlife. Others claimed it could disorient even seasoned travelers, as if the land itself shifted when you weren't looking. Paranormal theories grew. People spoke of interdimensional rifts, portals, energy vortices. Others believed in more primal force, something ancient and unseen, dwelling in the shadow of the pines. The term Bennington Triangle was later coined to describe the area, referencing its resemblance to other mysterious zones like the Bermuda Triangle. Glastonbury, the once booming logging town at its center, had already been abandoned by the early 1900s. Its isolation only added to the sense of dread. To this day, hikers report strange feelings on the mountain. Compass needles spin. Time feels off. Some claim to have heard voices calling from the woods, voices that sound familiar. Others return from hikes unable to explain where they've been or how long they were gone. Despite decades of theories, the truth remains elusive. The 5 disappearances were never solved. No patterns, no suspects, no real evidence. Just silence and the uneasy sense that the forest remembers. The Bennington Triangle isn't marked on any map. There are no warning signs at its borders, just trees, trails, and the whisper of names long forgotten. But if you venture deep enough, past the point where your phone stops working and the sounds of the world fall away, you might feel it too. That sensation that you're being watched, and if you don't turn back, you might never be seen again. The lead masks case. On a quiet August afternoon in 1966, a young boy climbing a hill in Niterói, Brazil, made a discovery that would puzzle authorities for decades. Beneath the scrub and tall grass of Morro do Vintém, 2 men lay side by side. Both were dead. Dressed neatly in suits and waterproof coats, each wore a peculiar item: metal masks shaped like sunglasses, fashioned out of thin sheets of lead. There were no signs of violence, no injuries, no struggle, just 2 bodies lying eerily still in the brush. Police identified them as Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana, 2 electronic repairmen from the town of Campos dos Goitacazes, nearly 200 kilometers away. Their families said they had left a few days earlier, telling others they were going to buy work equipment. But as the investigation unfolded, their plans turned out to be far stranger. The men had purchased the waterproof coats. They'd bought bottles of water from a bar not far from the hill, and they had a notebook. Its cryptic contents soon became the centerpiece of the mystery. Inside were the words, 1630, be at the agreed place. 1830, ingest capsules, after effect, protect metals, await signal, mask. There were no capsules found at the scene. No evidence of poison or foul play. The lead masks, awkward and handmade, seemed intended to shield their eyes. But from what? Initial theories included a drug overdose. Perhaps they were experimenting with psychedelics and had taken something that proved fatal. But no drugs were found in their belongings, and due to the delay in examining the bodies, decomposition prevented toxicology tests. Others speculated they were attempting to contact something beyond the physical world. Friends of the men reported they were interested in spiritualism, particularly in contacting extraterrestrial or divine beings. They had apparently been part of a group that held secret meetings and performed strange rituals. One rumor claimed they believed in a kind of spiritual science that would allow them to communicate with entities from other dimensions or planets. Were the masks meant to protect them from a blinding vision? Was the signal they awaited some kind of celestial phenomenon? And if so, why did no one else witness anything unusual that night? The hill where they were found had long been associated with strange lights in the sky. Locals had reported orbs hovering over the area, and some believed it was a hotspot for UFO activity. The lead masks only deepened that suspicion. The case made headlines across Brazil and even abroad, but the further authorities searched, the more confused the story became. One of the men had previously attempted a similar trip, weeks earlier, with another friend, only to turn back when things didn't feel right. What were they preparing for? What had they feared? Others wondered whether they had been lured to the site and poisoned. But again, there were no signs of struggle, no trauma, no clear motive for murder. Just two ordinary men, dead on a hillside, with lead masks and a strange note. Eventually, the case went cold. Today, the lead masks case remains one of Brazil's most enduring mysteries. It has inspired books, documentaries, and countless theories, each more unusual than the last. Skeptics argue it was a case of poor judgment, two men consumed by esoteric beliefs who took a fatal dose of something they didn't understand. Others insist there was more to it, that they had seen something they shouldn't have, or that their deaths were part of a ritual gone wrong. But the truth is, we may never know. The hillside is quiet now, overgrown. The wind moves through the brush where the bodies once lay. The masks, strange and silent, remain locked away in police evidence, and the note still defies explanation. Why were they there? What were they waiting for? Who or what was supposed to send the signal? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, did it come? We've come to an end of our stories. If you enjoyed listening, do subscribe, and if you want to be alerted when a new story is uploaded, hit the notification bell. Take care.